So we're getting ready to try our first sip of elderflower kombucha. I'm very excited about this. This is the first time I've tried this recipe, and tasting it's always my favorite part. But look at all the sweet little baby flowers and stuff that are just floating in there. Kombucha is one of those things that some people like drinking or consuming what's floating in it. So basically there's F1 and there's F2. Second fermentation is when you add any kind of fruit flavorings or herb flavorings or teas or anything like that that imparts more flavor than the actual first fermentation, which is just either green or black tea and sugar. So, and there's not a ton of sugar that comes through at the end of this process because the little microbes in the starter actually consume the sugar in order to ferment. And that's why kombucha is so good for your gut. But let's see what this tastes like. It's very floral. It's very light. It's very dainty. It's very lovely. It makes me really happy. So today, you might have guessed, this is a kombucha episode. I'm gonna go ahead and walk you guys through my process in terms of what creating our first fermentation looks like, and then also what our second fermentation looks like. So let's get going. All right, guys, we're gonna start off by boiling water. I've got this glass pitcher that's actually used to boil water in. It's excellent for any kind of tea making. I will say the kind of water that you use does matter. We are very blessed to have well water, so that's, yeah, I had it on the wrong burner, derp. This is gonna take forever if I use that burner. This is our quick boil burner. Thank goodness for natural gas. Anyway, like I said, well water is excellent. So the kind of tea that we're gonna use, this is Assam tea. It is a black tea. I wouldn't recommend any kind of herbal tea. You wanna stick with tea that is actually from the Camellia sinensis plant. So Kombucha and Assam. I like to blend both black tea and green tea. You don't want to do that too quickly because what's going to happen is you're going to send your little living organism into shock. So just like anything else, you want to do things slowly and smoothly. So I'm doing around about 50-50 of black and green tea here. And because I'm doing 3 different batches at one time, I'm going to use a ton of tea. So this is like just under 1 cup. Yeah, just under 1 cup. Let me see. So I just allow this to brew loose in this glass jar. You really want to try to do everything in glass as much as possible. So here we are, we're gonna have it waiting right here, ready for the water to boil, and we'll pour it in there. And then you also need to get your sugar ready. The kind of sugar I use is organic. Well, the kind of tea I use is organic as well, but I just get this off of Amazon, this wholesome cane sugar that's organic and fair trade. I really, shop your values, people. So because I'm doing 3 batches, I'm gonna do 3 1-cup measurements. And I'm gonna fast forward through a lot of this because honestly, this is a ton of information and nobody wants to sit here for 3 hours and watch me make this stuff. So 3 cups of sugar. I'm gonna heat up some water over here so I can just really quickly get it melted into the water. That way, whenever my tea is ready, I can blend it like seamlessly. So, wooden spoon here, stirring. I'm just gonna stir it up, and then we have everything ready and waiting. All right, now we have our tea ready to be steeped and our sugar water ready. Now we're just waiting for the water to boil, and I will show you the rest of the process. Okay, so the water is just about to a boil. You don't want to use water when it's actually boiling because it can damage green tea specifically. Yeah, I'm obviously not sure how to exist as a human, so me being awkward is par for the course in terms of trying to pick this up. So there we go, pouring the water in, and it's very hot. If you own one of these pitchers, do not sit it upside down because it will break. So if it's really, really hot like that, just leave it to sit that way. Steam, powerful. Anyway, timer, 15, 20 minutes. And now we're back. It's magically been 15, 20 minutes. It was actually 20 minutes. When you're moving this, please be careful. It is so, so hot. So we're gonna stick it in our water, and I've got this little sieve here. I wanna make sure that sugar is all dissolved. So stir it really quick. So the sieve is going to catch all of the tea leaves because we did do a loose brew. So we're just gonna carefully pour that in there. It's very hot, very steamy. All right, so I like to compost all of my waste products. I don't want to lose anything. So at least when I'm done with these leaves, they're going back into a system where they will be used in the garden to grow more food. So good stuff. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and pour the remainder of this in here. Nice and hot, nice and try to get all that stuff out of there. Like, you don't want to pour any of that mess down your drain. So, all right, getting the tea. All right, all into the compost. And this is just the very first portion of the whole kombucha situation. This is just the food for the starter tea. So we're gonna stir it up, make sure it's all well combined. And then we're gonna leave it sitting because we are gonna combine with our SCOBY, which is our actual living, yeah, that's still really hot. So here we are with the SCOBY. Okay, so we have our black tea, green tea blend over here at our workspace where our finished F1 is. So this is our first fermentation. This sticker is really cool. I was mentioning the temperature earlier. This sticker you can get on Amazon. It literally measures the temperature, what's inside. We also want to make sure that whatever's in here can breathe really well, which is why we just have the coffee filter on top, and we do hold that down with a rubber band to make sure nothing's getting in. Buggies really like this. Okay, that's me showing you my hands are clean as I'm pulling the pellicle out. The pellicle is kind of like the mother, kind of like on apple cider vinegar. It contains living organisms, but the tea itself also contains living organisms. All right, so we're gonna stir that up, make sure it's all blended well, and we are, okay, this is really important. So 2 cups, we're gonna save 2 cups of this starter tea from our previous batch because it's gonna help prevent mold. The more acidic, the better, which is the whole goal. You wanna maintain the health of the organism, honestly. It's like a pet. So the remainder of this is gonna go into our F2. I really liked, I know I don't, I was just talking about using glass, but I don't have any glass pitchers. So we are just gonna use this plastic pitcher. I rinsed out the previous container so that we can put this 2 cups of starter tea back into it. And that's gonna be our starter for our next batch. All right, so at this point, we just kind of repeat this process in terms of getting each of these jars cleaned up and towels. I go through so many towels. I usually on average go through about 5 little hand towels doing this. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and start our next one. This one got kind of stuck, this little coffee filter. It's pretty common as this fermentation occurs, the bubbles kind of come up and it causes the pellicle to kind of stick out of the water a little bit out of the tea. So the pellicle ideally functions as almost sort of like an immune system. It protects everything below it. So it doesn't exactly form a seal, but it kind of does something similar. I don't know. You can have problems if you have mold grow on top of your pellicle. I have seen that a few times. I've never had it happen to me, but I have certainly seen it happen to others in different forums and stuff online. A lot of people post pictures and are like, hey, what is this? What's going on with my kombucha? So here I'm showing you. I'm going to rinse it out again. Yeah, more hand towel. So 2 cups back in. So basically the way I do this, because I'm doing 3 different batch style brews, I do all of them the exact same. I just like being able to have the control of 3 different containers, 3 different things going at once, just in case one of them goes wrong. I haven't lost my entire kombucha system. So you could do batch brewing, or you could do continuous brewing, where you just feed the same starter over and over, but I've never done that. I like the control that this method offers in terms of the batches. All right, so we've gotten all 3 harvested and our 2 cups of starter put back in. And now we add the tea that we made earlier. So we want to stir it up. We still want to make sure that sugar is good and dissolved. You want to make sure it's not settled. And here I don't measure, I just kind of eyeball it. That's why I've got the 3 containers all sitting very close to one another, so I can just make sure that their level is about even. And this tea is a concentrate, so I am going to add water after this. So it's just, the biggest thing is to make sure that everybody gets the same amount. So this water I'm adding is cool water. I have the propagation mat, you can kind of see it behind what I'm doing right now. I'll show you in a bit. It takes me a little bit to get the jar actually where it's meant to be. But anyway, that helps control the temperature. I mentioned the temperature a couple of times. If it is not between like 80 and 90 degrees, you can get mold. And also the warmer it is, the more quickly things happen, and the safer it is, the better it is in terms of preventing mold. All right, so I got the water stirred in. I'm adding all of the pellicles back into their jars. I do not keep track of which one went into which jar. So that doesn't really matter that much to me, honestly. I really only do the 3 jar method in case something goes wrong. That was just the plate I had things sitting on. And then it's important to wipe. I know you just saw me with the wet, sticky coffee filter. Wiping the rim before you put the coffee filters on is ideal. That way you don't start out with them wet, because you would like to prevent it if at all possible, just because it can draw gnats and other things. It's, oh, here I am getting a fresh one out of the cabinet where we have all of our other coffee stuff. So I don't get a brand new coffee filter unless I need to. It is not something I do every single time. All right, here I am prepping the back spot where I had these, talking about all the use of hand towels. I leave these sitting on hand towels. Yeah, there's a good shot of my propagation mat. This you can get on Amazon. It's really just a seed starting mat. Yeah, I don't know why I struggled so badly with that. I like to face these so that the temperature is all facing the front, just in case, like I would know pretty quickly if that propagation mat wasn't working. But that is the entirety of F1. The only thing I didn't mention is that the larger your pellicle, the faster your brew is going to happen. So here we are getting ready for our F2. I don't like that giant blender. I really like to use this smaller cup. So getting everything in place, that's the biggest thing that I've noticed helps me in really anything, is just having all of my materials set out before getting started. So I am using, ideally what I like to do is I like to do individual containers. You can do a larger bottle, which I end up having to do because I don't have enough individual containers. Yeah, these are just old GT bottles that I have cleaned and used, and I have purchased those lids I did get on Amazon, and I can drop a link for that. I use a funnel. It's just a simple stainless steel funnel, and then this little grippy guy to help get the lids on tightly. And I don't remember what I need. What do I need? Oh yeah, gotta thaw the fruit. I just use frozen fruit because it's easier to keep. So those just go in mixing bowls and yeah, with some hot water. And there we go. I'm trying to figure out what kind of fruit I want to use. All right, here we go. We'll go with raspberries. I love raspberries. One of my absolute favorites. So I kind of break it up a little bit inside of inside of the bag. If anybody's never thawed fruit before, I don't know what to tell you. You can thaw out fruit pretty easily with some hot water. You could just leave it in the fridge as well, but I like to do this lickety-split. The quicker, the better, which really didn't turn out for me in this because honestly, it ended up taking around 2 days because of our power outage. All right, peaches. And here I am pouring out all this water, forgetting that we don't have any power as I'm recording this. And I've run out of water at some point, but thank God it was after I was filming this video. All right, these are blackberries. These are blackberries that I actually harvested off of my plants, so I know that they are nice and clean and no yucky chemicals or anything. So I'm just gonna put the water right in the bag with those. Let them thaw right there. Set those gently down. What else? Blueberries. We're gonna do blueberries. So these were harvested off of my in-laws. Like they have some family land where they've got a bunch of large blueberry plants. I'm very grateful that they are willing to share those. They actually did the picking and everything, so they're just in the freezer ready to use for this or for baked goods. So we're gonna let those sit and let those thaw. And again, with the hand towel. I don't know why I'd never have enough hand towels. All right, that's the prep for F2. So, you guys might notice things are a little bit different. We had to stop in the middle of what we were doing yesterday because our power was out, which meant I couldn't use the blender. I actually filmed a fair portion of yesterday's video in terms of, actually creating the kombucha, and we're just gonna pick up right where we left off. So I have my kombucha over here. This is finished F1 kombucha, and I'm just gonna show you what I do in terms of getting all of the fruit and flavorings into each jar. All right, so getting everything ready. I left this sitting out to thaw overnight. It didn't hurt anything. So we're gonna go ahead and get all the water out of our fruit because I know for sure it's thawed at this point. And yeah, so this part, in the very beginning of the video, I was telling you about, some people like to eat the stuff that's actually inside the F2. Most of the time, that's just fruit. They will form a little bit of a baby pellicle, like I showed you in our big F1 containers, but they're teeny, teeny, tiny. All right, so getting ready. You want to make sure that your F1, whenever you're adding it, is nice and stirred up, just in case anything settled to the bottom. This is just the way I was taught to do it. I will link all of her videos as well. You Brew Kombucha on YouTube. She is excellent. I'm more than happy to share her information because she helped me down this journey immensely. All right, so we're gonna start out with blackberries and raspberries. I keep rinsing my hands off and then drying them off. All right, I'm just showing you what I got in here. Nice squishy raspberries and blackberries, and you wanna make sure that all of your fruits blended up really well. So I'm kind of fast forwarding through this because I know nobody really wants to sit here and listen to a blender go. And then you try to get it all off the lid. That's what it looks like, really well blended. You want a puree. So at this point, you just use your funnel and get a fair amount in each jar. You don't need just a ton. I'll show you in just a second just how much is in there. So it's just like maybe an inch in the bottom of the jar. And you can do more or less. It all kind of depends on how you want your stuff to taste in terms of how strong it is. And then you just fill it up the rest of the way. Very simply with your finished F1. And then you're gonna just, see, nice and pretty. You put the cap on, you want to make sure it seals well. That's how you're going to get the carbonation. And I like to use this little rubber gripper to make sure that the seal is on there really tightly. All right, here's my label. I'm really cheap and I really like to use just painter's tape and a Sharpie. I've got the date written on there. It's not the go bad date. There is no go bad date with these. This is just for me to know when I put it in the bottle. So there you go, nice and finished. You want to make sure you shake it really well because that's how you're going to get the microbes moved throughout their fuel. Essentially, that's what the fruit is. They are feeding on the sugars in the fruit, which is why they don't really go bad. That's why the kombucha just continues to age. What you do is, in order to get the carbonation, you allow it to ferment sealed like that, warm. I say warm, you don't want it hot because it can't explode, but you want it in the dark somewhere. I leave mine in the cabinet. I'll show you here in a bit. But after about 4 days of sitting in the cabinet, then it moves to the refrigerator, and it can stay in the refrigerator indefinitely. I've heard it said that it kind of changes to almost like a sour beer kind of flavor. I haven't tried it myself. All right, you see I'm pouring the F1 into the blender bottle. What I'm doing there is trying to get all of the fruit puree out of the bottle. I don't want to allow any of that to go to waste because it's kind of weird to get the proportions right. Occasionally you have a little bit extra F1 at the end or not quite enough fruit, one or the other or both. I think that is the exact same thing that I just said. All right, here's my big boy jar. Like I said, I ran out of the other GT bottles, but it's the same thing. You just want to make sure it seals well. I will say you should not be using plastic in terms of actually finishing out kombucha. It's okay to, like that one that I had to store overnight in the plastic would be fine. But if you're actually allowing the fermentation to happen in there, those particles of microplastics are going to be released into the actual finished product. And we have enough microplastics in our system. We don't need any more. Thank you. All right, so here we are with more fruit in here. This looks like blueberries and blackberries. Just that. Yep, got it nice and blended up. You can do any fruit combination you want to. You can experiment with crazy stuff. You saw I did the elderflower. You can do herbs. You can do herbal tea. I really enjoy making a lavender syrup and doing that in there with some blueberries and just fresh herbs. So here's another angle. I realized as I was editing this that it just does not look right coming out of that funnel. So please excuse me. But this is just so you can actually see what is happening, because I realized in that previous angle it was a little bit difficult to see. So now you can at least see the amount. You want to leave a little bit of headspace in these because so the way carbonation works is those microbes are releasing gases, and those gases are what the carbonation is. So you need a little bit of room. If you make it too tight, all those gases are not going to be able to build up. So here we are. I've used all of that first jar of F1. So now I've got to put the other F1 into this. I really like using this pitcher because it gives me control. I can actually handle it well and get proper amounts into things and not have to worry too much. So I'm rinsing things off kind of in between, not between every single flavor, because some of the flavors are similar enough where I'm not really worried about flavors changing or being affected by one another, but between certain ones I will change. This one, we're doing raspberry and peach. So I've definitely wanted to change between the blackberry and blueberry for the raspberry and peach, just for the color, just for the appearance, honestly. Because it offers this really nice bright orangey flavor color combination. It's really lovely. But if you add some blueberry or some blackberry into it, you get big dark chunks. So here we are again, labeling everything. I'm not going to show you me labeling every single jar. This is me labeling one of each jar and making sure there's lids on everybody. So one of my favorite things to do that I just don't have any of right now, I had used all of it. I like to harvest fresh lemongrass, like the actual chunky, meaty part of the stalks, and plop a couple of those down into these jars. And you can just plop them in with the fruit. You don't have to like brew a tea and pour a tea into it. You can just leave the whole herb. And you can do that with any kind of herb. I regularly do that with basil. I regularly do that with thyme. I'll show you here in a little bit that I end up doing it with rosemary. All right, so again, just getting everything into the jar. I will say, compared to what you can purchase at a store, the stuff that you make, you have so much more control over when you harvest your F1. That's going to determine how acidic it is and how like tart it is. Like if you actually buy GT in the store, sometimes it is so tart that it just like hurts your tongue. I like mine a little bit sweeter. Okay, so this is a good example. The proportions are a little weird. This is me at the very end with this peach raspberry, and I want to make sure that all the jars at least have some flavor. So getting towards the end, I like to keep a few things around the house that I could use really quickly in case I don't have, like I don't want to have to thaw more fruit. So I have some fresh apples sitting over here. A lot of times, ideally, I'll have something in the garden that I can go and harvest. Like there's more blackberries out there if I really needed that. And then I really like oranges. So, all right. I made a little bit of a mess with the lids here, so I really felt like they needed to be cleaned off before capping them. And we are almost towards the end of this, y'all. I know this has been quite the trek in terms of just the explanation. I didn't realize how involved of a process this was until I started showing you, because it's become such second nature. It's kind of like sourdough. It's, once you get used to it, it's nice and easy. All right, so here, I told you, oranges. I also still don't have any other jars. So a mason jar will work very well if you have a one-piece lid. If you do not have a one-piece lid, you're gonna kind of be in trouble because it cannot seal if it's just that regular sleeve with the little cap on it. So we're just juicing, getting as much of this orange inside here. I just used one whole orange because I was pretty sure this is a quart jar. I was thinking a quart was just the exact amount that I needed, or that I had of the F1 in order to actually finish using it up. So it worked out quite well. Here we are, making sure it goes in perfectly, and yep, there we go, just right. And now I go outside and grab some rosemary, and I kind of rough it up just a little bit before I put it in there, just to make sure those oils are going to get active. And then you seal it right up. And that is our complete F2. All right, so all of our kombucha is now processed and labeled. Now we just have to put it away. So really quickly, let me show you where we're gonna put it. So it needs to process in the dark. So it goes in the cabinet. So let's go ahead and get things put up. I'm trying to think of anything else that you might need to know in terms of kombucha stuffs. So one thing I will say, if you leave these guys in the dark to ferment for too long, sealed up like this, they will explode. 4 days is max for me, and it also varies depending on what fruit you have in there. I will tell you that pineapple ferments really quickly. There's something about the sugars and the enzymes that are actually in the fruit that just really like getting carbonated. I have had to repaint my ceiling, but aside from that, this is just my absolute favorite thing to make. So I really hope you'll try it. All right, so these guys are sitting on a cookie sheet because every now and then they will, as they are fermenting, every now and then they'll leak a little bit. So they'll stay in here for a few days and then they're ready to drink. All right, I wanted to thank you guys so much for joining me for 2 whole days worth of making kombucha. Ordinarily this process is quicker, But yeah, that's how you do it. So that's F1 and F2. I'm gonna drop some other resources in the links below. There's some people out there sharing a ton of excellent information on how to do it. This was just kind of a fun rundown in terms of my process. So there's plenty of other resources out there. I would really encourage you, if you are concerned about your gut health, to learn how to ferment foods. Not only kombucha. Kombucha is a very easy starter drink. There's other stuff out there. There's ginger bugs, there's water kefir. People do milk kefir as well. And then of course there's things like sauerkraut and any kind of fermented vegetable. Those things are excellent for your gut health. They feed your microbiome that is really, really important for everything functioning well. So that's exactly why I got into it, and that is why I would encourage you to get into it. And it also just tastes really amazing and it's really fun to experiment with. So yeah, thanks again for hanging out with me. This has been Sam from Harvey Cat Homestead, and I hope you guys have an absolutely beautiful day.